Appreciate it. Mr. Abramowitz.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rubio, Senator Dermod, thank you for holding this very important hearing, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I work for Humanity United, which is a philanthropic organization based in San Francisco that works on building peace and advancing human freedom, including through the fight to combat modern-day slavery. Mr. Chairman, as you know, human trafficking, and as you stated in your fine opening statement, human trafficking remains a huge problem around the globe. Just last month, the International Labor Organization issued a new global estimate that used a definition very similar to the one in U.S. law that you have worked so hard on, that estimated that at any given moment there are 21 million people in forced labor and modern-day slavery. But these aren't just numbers. I just want to compliment Ms. Pickett-Smith for raising out 3 specific examples of survivor voices, which has always been an important element of the trafficking movement, to elevate survivor voices, to demonstrate that this is an abuse that can be overcome and people can move on with their lives. So I just want to thank you for doing that, and I want to thank the courage of those who are willing to stand forward and have their stories, which are very difficult stories, be told. As we continue to combat this challenge, Mr. Chairman, I want to highlight several lessons of the past decade that I think we've learned. First, we've learned that traffickers most often use coercion and fear, not chains, to enslave victims. But that's often not well understood by the U.S. public, who more focus on the inability to leave as opposed to these subtle forms of coercion. Second, we've learned that sex and labor trafficking frequently go hand in hand. When I was in Nepal in 2010, I was shocked to hear from service providers that such dual exploitation is as high as 90% of those who have left their villages seeking better opportunities. Third, we have learned how widespread trafficking is, and that in any given week, each of us may well have eaten, driven, dressed, or texted with some product that involves, in part, modern-day slavery. Fourth, and in that connection, we have learned that we need an all-of-the-above approach, embracing many disciplines and engaging many actors, and perhaps we can talk about that in the dialogue to come. Mr. Chairman, let me sketch out some of the solutions to these problems, which are described in detail in my written statement. First, developing coalitions and partnerships can maximize impact. At Humanity United, we support the Alliance to End Slavery and Trafficking, which is a group of 12 U.S. human rights organizations that work on slavery both here and in the United States, and we're also trying to foster collaboration between civil society at the state and local level around the United States with law enforcement. We have to build these types of local partnerships not only in the United States, but also globally. Second, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, we need to address supply chains, but also foreign labor recruiters. Some companies are signing up to a zero-tolerance policy in their supply chains, and in 2010, a number agreed to more detailed implementation guidelines that could make a real difference in fighting modern-day slavery. Additionally, the new California Transparency in Supply Chains Act now requires transparency on what companies are doing to eliminate modern-day slavery from their supply chains. This will allow us to learn from the leaders in this field, but also urge the laggards to do more. Civil society and the private sector are also developing new standards to reduce exploitation by foreign labor recruiters, many of whom you suggested are creating some of the terrible exploitation that we've seen in the fishing industry in Thailand. These sometimes unscrupulous actors not only lure girls to the brothels of Phnom Penh, but have also put legal H-2B workers in forced labor in the U.S. shrimping industry on the Gulf Coast. The new standards to address this issue include greater transparency on terms of employment and the complete prohibition of fees. And all businesses that use foreign labor recruiters should demand that these standards be met. We also have to develop smarter interventions in vulnerable communities, expand our assistance to survivors, and increase prosecution of perpetrators. And I think we can discuss some of these later in the hearing. But, Mr. Chairman, I have to say that as much as we've learned over the last 10 to 12 years, we must be honest that we still need to invest more in learning. We need to hone in on the interventions that really work. And while we know some important elements, we need to learn more. Mr. Chairman, as my colleagues will say, and Ms. Pinkett-Smith has said, much of what has happened in the last 10 years is based on strong U.S. leadership, which has to continue. First, we need to strengthen U.S. diplomacy, as discussed in my written statement. Second, the U.S. can do more on supply chains. The Department of Agriculture recently put out voluntary guidelines on trying to keep slavery out of food supply chains, and they've just put out, at the end of last month, a $5 million RFA, request for proposals and agreements, to try to see how we can pilot those new guidelines. I think that's very exciting and something we should be looking at carefully. Senator Rubio is going to be holding a briefing on supply chains on this Thursday afternoon, and hopefully that can lead to federal legislation mirroring the California Transparency Act. And I'd also like to see the Department of Labor issue long delayed supply chain guidelines as mandated by current law. Third, the U.S. can reinforce standards on foreign labor recruiters, as laid out in my statement. I note that recent Department of Labor rules for H-2B workers actually put in some key protections, not enough in our view, but certainly very important steps forward. But those rules are now under attack in the U.S. courts, and they're subject to an appropriation rider that I hope the Senate reconsiders during the legislative process. Fourth, the U.S. can pass the TVPRA, S1301, which you've had such a huge role in authoring, Mr. Chairman, as well as Senator Rubio, with the co-sponsorship of both Senator Durbin and Senator Cardin. And I don't think I could speak any more eloquently about the importance of that legislation than Ms. Pinkett-Smith did. But there are also some other legislation regarding government contracting and strengthening child welfare protections that I think deserve a review. Finally, this committee can help increase the priority trafficking is given by ensuring that assistant secretarial and ambassadorial nominees are routinely asked questions about trafficking, and you bring this issue up when you travel abroad. This is a low or no-cost intervention that can yield tremendous benefits over the long term as countries see this and our officials see this as a continuing important element of U.S. foreign policy. Mr. Chairman, we obviously still have a distance to travel in our efforts to end this scourge. As we approach the 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation this September, we must be humbled that slavery is still present in the United States and even prevalent around the world. We in civil society stand ready to partner with you and together to try to take more steps on the path towards eradicating this modern-day slavery and advancing the cause of human freedom. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging.
Thank you, Mr. Abramowitz. Thank you very much. Ms. Burkholder.